Hi.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, fine. Right, actually, I
Okay,
might just
great.
switch to my tablet because I can stand that up a bit better.
Okay.
Uh, sorry about this.
No, you're fine.
Okay. Ooh, okay, accept. I'm going to call yes. Right, I'm going to hang up with my phone and
Okay.
hopefully it'll switch to my tablet, which I can then lean up. So, right, fingers crossed.
Sure. Okay.
Ah, aha, okay. Right. Yeah, no,
Is
that's
that better?
better. Definitely. Yeah.
Okay, great.
And hey, there we
Yeah,
go.
it doesn't it's not essential for me that I need to be able to like see you very well on the recording later, so don't worry about that.
Okay.
Just as long as you're comfortable.
Yeah, that's
Um,
fine.
okay, so I'm gonna start with some demographic
Mhm.
questions. I already have your full name from the consent form.
Yeah.
How old are you?
Oh God. Uh, what year is it? I think I'm 34.
Okay, it's
Fairly
2016.
sure I am. Yeah.
Okay,
No, I had my birthday recently, and once you get past 30, well, I don't know. I've just kind of stopped counting a bit. So yeah,
yeah.
let's go with 34. That sounds about right.
Um, how do you identify racially or ethnically?
White British.
Okay. What are your pronouns?
She, her.
Okay. Um, where are you located now and where are you from?
I am located in Chelmsford in Essex in England, and I am from Chester in England.
Okay. And what's your, for lack of a better phrase, sexual orientation?
Um, I'm married to a man, so more for all intents and purposes heterosexual.
Okay. I'm gonna just set up a recording on my phone because I
Okay,
forgot to do that, and I do that just in case for some reason this
sure.
recording doesn't save. Okay, let's see. There we go. All right. So, what are some of your favorite metal bands? And you can tell me a little bit about them and what you like about them.
Okay. My favourite band probably is Moon Sorrow, who are, I don't know if you've listened to them at all, because if you haven't, then you totally should.
Which band?
Moon Sorrow.
Oh, yeah.
They're a Finnish kind of heathen black metal band. They don't really fall neatly into very many categories. Um, yeah, their songs kind of range from 8 minutes long up to over half an hour, and I really like that because it feels quite kind of like a piece of classical music in a way. You can really feel the sort of rise and fall of the songwriting, and you get kind of a whole story in a song. You don't just get it's just I just really like the long forms that they choose for many of their songs, and they mix in lots of Finnish folk instruments as well. They use different time signatures. Their songs are never kind of boring, and they've moved from sort of being quite standard, I suppose, folk metal in their early albums to being I don't even know what they'd be categorized as now, but they draw in loads of influences and loads of different melodic styles and loads of different instruments, and they have sort of male voice choirs on there as well as growled lyrics and everything. So I just find them just really, just yeah, a
Yeah,
very
that
very
sounds like
excellent band.
a lot of variety. That I've heard a few
Mm.
people mention that band, and that's something I should check out. Actually, I'm a member of like a a private torrent tracker site, and uh, I have a bunch of free downloads on it.
Mhm.
So I have to figure out things to download. That would be a good one.
Yeah, definitely. Their third album is the one where they kind of meld their early folk metal with the later sort of they bring in more of the black metal influences there. So that's an interesting one to start with. I would go for that. It's Kiven Kantaja. Oh, and they sing
Okay.
entirely in Finnish as well, which is cool because it sounds like it. Well, it's a completely strange language. You know, it's one of the three non-Indo-European languages in Europe, along with Hungarian and I can't ever remember what the third one is. Estonian, but that's kind of basically Finnish. So yeah, so it's a language which is completely unfamiliar. Like even if I listen to Swedish because I study German, I can kind of get the odd word here and there, but Finnish is just
Yeah.
completely something else, and I find that really fascinating as well. So linguistically, it's very interesting. And
Are you
whenever I meet Finnish people, they're like, "Oh, you know a few words in Finnish," and I'm like, "Yes, I can say really useful things like bear hunt." Great. Or stone bearer or
um
death. I can say death in Finnish. It's like, wow, what an
well,
achievement.
that's pretty useful.
Mhm.
Um, are you a linguistics person, or
Yeah, I studied languages at university.
that makes sense?
Yeah,
Um,
more French than German, but yeah.
okay, so I think what I heard you say is that you like their long song format, storytelling, the instrumentation, the fact that they sing in Finnish. Do you want to add anything to that?
I definitely say the different time signatures as well. Like they'll quite often switch from 5/8 to 7/8 to 3/4 within the space of a few bars, and it's really, you know, it's not just sort of standard 4/4
Yeah.
notation. It's yeah, I like that too.
Okay.
It kind of keeps it unpredictable. So even if you've heard a song like 100 times, you can always kind of hear something new. And I have heard them all 100 times. Yeah. I should possibly, I don't know, mention how I got into them as well, which is
Yeah,
I was
sure.
on a forum, I was on a thread about, you know, general metal chat, and someone had downloaded a song from a torrent tracker or somewhere, and it didn't have any information about who the artist was or what the song was called, and so they posted it in a thread and were like, "Hey, anyone, can you tell me what this song is? I have no idea." And I downloaded it to have a listen. The first time I listened, I was like, "This is my new favorite band." It was really weird. It was kind of like instant love. And then someone was like, "Oh yeah, that's Moon Sorrow. That's Unodux and Lapsy from Kiven Kantaya." And I was like, "I must find everything that this band
Yeah.
has ever done and listen to it." So that was kind of it. That was like where it all started. And I've seen them in, I don't know, many different countries. I've travelled around Europe to see them. We even went to Bulgaria to try and see them.
Oh,
But
wow.
the lead
It's really
singer had
cool.
a back operation, so they had to cancel the concert. So we just had a weekend in Sofia instead. Oh well.
Hold on. Okay. So this metal forum that you were a part of, how did you become a part of that?
Well, actually, it's kind of a forum for general chat about anything, but it has various subfora for things like music, photography. There's one for people who like to take drugs. There's one for people who are into guns and cars. It's called Something Awful, and it was really probably most active about 5 to 10 years ago. It's kind of dying off a bit now, I think, as is the way with some internet cultures. But it was, yeah, it was a really important place for me. I've met lots of my real life friends through it, and in fact, I found my husband through it as well. So that's kind of a thing that happens through the metal thread, actually.
Sorry, I'm hearing cat noises.
So
That's really cool.
they're definitely not
Okay.
on my end, unfortunately.
Um, okay. Do you have any other bands you want to tell me about? Because
Um,
I mean, I want to know what you're into, and I also want to know more things for me to look at.
Sure. I really like the whole Cascadian scene, so Wolves in the Throne Room and all of the bands that are kind of connected to that. I definitely like metal, which has influences of post rock in there and some shoegaze. If I'm feeling
Mhm.
a bit more sort of chilled out, I really love Bolt Thrower. There we go, completely different direction.
Yeah.
I'm not huge into death metal. I like quite a lot of death metal, but I don't really love most of it. But I make an exception for Bolt Thrower. I don't even know why. I just absolutely love Bolt Thrower. So that's really that. Yeah, no, they're just great. It could be my husband's influence, Stu. I'll probably talk about him a lot. So
Yeah.
might as well, say hi. He's downstairs playing Destiny at the moment, but yeah, he loves Bolt Thrower, and he's from Birmingham, which is where Bolt Thrower is from, as well as obviously Black Sabbath and a whole load of other bands, Judas Priest and people. So he's kind of really into the death metal Birmingham scene. He's got me sort of into a bit of it, but yeah, no, I really love Bolt Thrower.
Cool.
Just really
That is one that I've
uncompromising
seen
and awesome.
actually.
You do know them?
Yeah, I've seen them once in Boston.
In Maryland Death Fest or something.
No, they were just playing a show in Boston. I forget
Oh.
who they were playing with. Okay, so what attracts you to metal in general?
I suppose it changes over time. Yeah, it's this is probably going to be quite tricky to explain.
That's okay.
Yeah, well, I should probably no, interesting. Okay, so when I was younger, I had a fairly horrible tendency to think of myself as not like other girls, which I now recognise as internalized misogyny. But it was quite a kind of useful position for me in that I've never been particularly good at traditional femininity type things, so I kind of never really truly well, I always hated things like boy bands, like Take That, Boyzone, all of those, like East 17. Oh my God, I hated them. I just absolutely hated most of the music that was marketed at my age group when I was a teenager growing up. I just thought it was complete nonsense. I kind of didn't really get interested in boys or people until a bit older. So I didn't really get the whole focus on, like, it was just all about love and kissing. I was just like, that's really boring. I don't want to listen to a song that's about like, oh, my girlfriend's so great. I was like, who cares? Come on, dude.
Yeah.
Write about something a bit more interesting. So I never really felt like there was music which I particularly identified with. And then I saw that as also sort of being part of my not like other girls nonsense. So I only actually came to metal in my early 20s. So I went through university without really discovering it. When I was younger, I kind of had an idea that I might like metal. So I thought, well, who are the biggest metal bands that I've heard of? Iron Maiden. So I went and listened to them, and I was like, I don't really like Iron Maiden very much. And I'm sort of getting into them a little bit these days, but only a little bit. And I still don't really like them. So it's kind of like that really put me off. And also Slayer as well. I listened to Slayer, and it's like I think they're okay, but I don't like love them, and I don't really choose to listen to them ever.
Right.
So it's like if they're on, it's fine, but it's not something that I really like. So I thought, well, if these are sort of the typical metal bands, then maybe I don't like metal after all. I quite liked Metallica. They were okay. Everyone had heard of them, and they were on the radio and stuff. But yeah. So anyway, having never really discovered my niche, I kind of just felt adrift a bit, and I sort of went down a regrettable new metal rabbit hole for a few years, which, less said about the better. But I never really liked it. I kind of recognised it was ridiculous, but at the same time, there was something in new metal which I did like, which I suppose looking back would be the harsh vocals and the guitars and maybe even some of the breakdowns as well. And I thought, okay, well, this isn't quite right, but it's closer. And then I found Rammstein. I still love Rammstein. Like, they're very, I don't know if they're really even metal. I suppose there's lots of, they're more sort of hard rock, but there's lots of crossover with metal fans. And System of a Down as well, who are another one of these bands that don't really fit into a neat niche. So I really love those two bands. And I was like, why isn't there anything else out there that really sounds like this? And then I started using Last.fm, and that helped me to, I used the related artists radio, where you start with an artist and then it sort of finds more artists that people who like that artist also listen to. So it's all based on social recommendations. And then I discovered a load of bands that way. So starting off with like Babby metal, like Children of Bodom, who I still have a bit of a soft spot for, especially the first few albums. And then Opeth, and I was like, okay. At first I was like, the vocals aren't quite, I don't really get them. But then the more I listened to them, the more I loved it. And then suddenly, like, harsh vocals just clicked. And after that, basically anything metal was fair game, because it was like, oh, okay. I suddenly understand what people say when they went on about how the vocals are just like percussion, really, more than an actual meaning, a way of conveying meaning. And then that, I suppose, that links back to my whole disdain for songs about like love and romance and whatever. It's like, you know, the lyrics and the vocals aren't as important as the instrumentation. So metal is very much about the instrumentation, and the lyrics are sort of usually just made up nonsense about fighting hordes of warriors in the frozen north, like whatever, that's fine, don't care. Can't really understand what they're saying anyway. Even if they're singing in English, it's difficult to find out what's going on. So the vocals, by and large, don't play a huge role. I suppose they do, but in a different kind of way, just to establish tone. I suppose if there was a metal band which had all of the trappings of a metal band, or say black metal band, even like the Corpse Paint and what have you, and if they were singing songs about like fluffy bunnies, it would be a bit weird. And I don't think it would really work. But apart from that, you know, as long as they're singing something vaguely evil, then fine, whatever.
Let me just let this cat in.
Oh, bring the cat. I love cats. Oh, hello. Hello, precious. Hello.
Oh, he doesn't know how to meow. He yips though.
Oh, a cutie. Oh, look at him. Look at his little face.
He's only about 9 months old.
Oh, what a darling.
And he has a brother who's in the window, but he's sleeping. Oh yeah, you can kind of see his head. Yeah, there he is.
I'll take your word for it.
Okay. So I found it really interesting what you were saying about like harsh and growled vocals as sort of a not so much a vehicle for meaning in the words, but in themselves, in being in their like tonal sounds. Can you talk more about that? Is that right?
Yeah, I think so. As I say, I tend to listen to black metal most. A couple of other bands I've been listening to death recently is Blut aus Nord, who are a French band, and I've been listening to the Memoria Vetusta trilogy of albums that they've done. They're completely just weird and spacey and amazing. And Dark Space as well, which is a Swiss band which they do kind of concept albums about space and space noises, and it's all very sort of the giant shrieking void of space rather than like, oh, cool aliens and whatever, like some sort of Townsend thing. And who else? Anal Nathrak. They're a band who actually I do quite like the vocals of, to completely contradict everything I've just said. They don't publish their lyrics. And they sort of make a point of not publishing their lyrics, so you can kind of work out some of what they're saying, but not all of it. But the bits that I can work out I like, and they weave in lots of philosophical references, and they have sentences and verses in different languages like French, German, and Portuguese and stuff, which is quite cool. And
which band is this?
Anal Nathrak, so Anaal. Nathrakh.
Okay.
Oh, and their latest album has kind of gone off in a sort of slightly weird dubstep direction. So that's interesting. They've kind of got a hardcore influence as well. They like a bit of a breakdown. But yeah, I really like most of what they've done, like the later albums, well, last two, I think, like maybe not so much. But Vanitas and everything before that, really, really, really good albums. So, yeah, and they're a nice bunch of guys as well. And I've met them, friends with two of them on Facebook, you know, that kind of thing. Cool. Birmingham, and they're really down to earth. And Yeah, so they're good. But going back to vocals and things, yeah, I don't really bother looking up the vocals for most songs. I'm just happy not knowing what's going on. I suppose Satyricon, they're a band with quite good vocals, quite
Yeah.
good lyrics, quite fun to sing along to if you go and see them. I suppose there's lots of ways for bands to convey meaning outside of purely just lyrics. So it's about, I suppose, what they wear and if they perform live, about their stage presence and their stage act. And then kind of just their imagery. So, if you're a black metal band, you've got to have a spiky white logo on a black background with lots of inverted crosses and 666 and blah, blah, blah. There's actually a meme which I saw on Twitter or somewhere, which is quite funny. It's like a lineup for a real festival. I think it was like a grindcore festival, and there's like loads and loads of black and white logos and spikes and sort of, typical metal imagery that people would expect. And there's one band that's called something like Fluffy Bunnies, and it's got like a rainbow bubble writing logo. and it's just like, they're a real band. I looked them up, and they're one of these sort of sort of hardcore bands that's just completely out there, sort of municipal waste style, I guess. And someone's written like, "Damn you, whatever your name is." I don't think they're called Fluffy Bunnies, but it's definitely something like that. Like, did you not get the memo about your logo? You're ruining our whole poster, type thing. So yeah, it is. I'll try and find it and send it to you. It was amusing.
That would be great.
Yeah,
I've seen on Etsy someone makes patches for pop artists that say, like Carly Rae Jepsen and Miley Cyrus,
and stuff.
They're styled in a black metal way, which is it's really funny to me because it's jarring, and then you're like, oh, why is this so jarring? It's because I'm not used to, seeing these words styled in this way, and like it makes you think about what connotations you have with those styles.
There was a big flash like maybe 2 years ago when H&M, the clothing company, they made a fake patch jacket or t-shirt or something.
I remember that.
With loads of band logos on, and then everyone was like, "What's this band?" And then a group of musicians from the metal scene kind of made up. They recorded a few songs even for these fake bands, and they gave them all weird backstories and sort of created a few websites and stuff. So that was quite interesting in terms of pushing back against corporate intrusion into especially black metal, which people who are really, really into it see as kind of something that should be above material concerns. It should be, not involved with commercialism. It should be all about not selling out and just like performing to 3 people in a room in a pub in the middle of nowhere in Poland or something, So that was interesting from a variety of angles. I don't know if that fits in with what you're writing about.
I've been hearing about something over the past few days. Let me look at the name of who this is. Somebody called Mirker.
Yeah. Kim Kelly wrote an article about her. Yeah.
So what do you know about this situation? Because I don't know a lot, but I know that people have sent her death threat, and from what I've gathered, there's not really a whole lot of reason. It's just kind of that she's creating.
She's a woman, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, do you want to tell me what you know about that? Because I don't know a lot.
I can't say I know a huge amount. I listened to some of her music on Bandcamp, and it was all right. It wasn't terrible, but it wasn't really the kind of thing that I listened to. So whatever. But as I understand it, I think she's been getting quite hyped within the metal scene, and people sort of being like, "Oh, who is this mysterious artist?" And then obviously, as with every music scene, when you get one person that's getting attention, then all the other jealous people in the scene go, "Oh, that's not why is she getting all this attention? It's because she's a woman." So I think that all kind of went on last year. I didn't really pay a huge amount of attention, I have to admit. And then, the main thing I know is a couple of days ago, Kim wrote about it for Vice or someone probably, and just wrote an article saying, you know, if you're having a go at Mirko because of her gender, then just fuck off out of our scene. You're a big waste of space, which I totally agree with. You know, that I think that's pretty on point. Yeah, I have to say I'm quite sort of consciously disengaged from a lot of the metal drama these days. It's just like it just never ends, and it just feels quite kind of, I don't know, you can only keep on banging your head against a brick wall for so long before your head starts to hurt and you wander off and do something else. So I don't really keep up with drama the same way that maybe I used to, because it's quite interesting in a sort of soap opera kind of way.
Yeah.
And goodness knows there's a lot of drama in the
you meant Kim from Noisy, right?
Yeah, Kim Kelly. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you know her?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Because I would love to talk with her sometime, but I just don't really. I'm kind of afraid to approach her because, like, you know, like I'm sure she's busy and she has an important job and all that. But it would be really cool to talk to her. How do you know her?
I used to be a sub-editor for Invisible Oranges.
Okay.
The metal blog. Yeah. And yeah, she was a writer for the site at the time, and then that's how we kind of got chatting. And then she came to London for a bit and lived in London and went to shows and stuff. So I met her at those, and then we follow each other on Twitter and just sort of, yeah, just.
I think that's how I found you. I was going through her followers. Yeah.
Yeah, no, she's a really sweet girl. She's really lovely. Yeah, I can do a Facebook introduction or something if you like that.
I would love that. Yeah.
You should also talk to Beth Weingarner, who is another writer for Invisible Oranges. She's really cool.
Okay, I'm writing this down, and I'm gonna send you an email or something later, just to remind you, and probably I'll ask you about some of the bands you've recommended and stuff like that.
Cool. And have you reached out to Natalie Zed as well?
I have not. Well, that sounds familiar, but it might just be a name that I saw and not someone I talked to.
But she's really lovely, and I think she'd probably be open to this kind of thing as well. So
cool, great.
I'll probably think of a load of other people as soon as I hang up. So
that's fine. You know, like, you're always free to email me or message me on Twitter or whatever. What was I gonna say? I wrote a bunch of notes. Okay, so what makes something metal for you as opposed to rock or hardcore? What defines metal, do you think? And I know that's a really hard question, and it's fine if you have a lot of trouble answering it, because I do myself. But I'm just collecting, you know, thoughts.
It's like that famous definition by a British judge of pornography when he was asked to sum it up in a case. It's like, well, I don't know how to define it, but I know it when I see it. And I suppose metal is like, I have no idea how to define it apart from, I don't know, like aggressive guitars, harsh vocals, drumming, whatever. But I definitely know it when I hear it. I should say as well, I'm completely clueless about most of the technical aspects of metal. So that's quite, that's something that I've never really put together particularly. I'll go and see a band with Stu and some of our friends, and he'll be like, oh, the drummer's really good. And I'll listen out and be like, oh yeah, I suppose you're right. But it's not something that I would necessarily pick up if I hadn't been told. I'm getting a bit better these days. At least I can identify various kinds of guitars, which is handy. But I still have no idea what people really talk about when they say things like, oh, tremolo picking, or so it's I suppose someone who actually did know a lot about that technical side of stuff would be able to give a technical definition. I can't really.
You know, it's interesting. That's something I've been hearing a lot. Two things, which is that people will say, I don't know how to define it, but I know it when I hear it. And they'll also say that they don't know anything about genre and
Mm.
technical aspects. Although some people that I've interviewed are musicians and they do know, but especially genre. And I think that's really interesting because I kind of think there are very few people, or maybe even no people, who really know or get to define genre. I think it's like really loose, and a lot of people have a lot of trouble with it because genre barely exists. And so I've heard that from pretty much everyone, like, oh, I don't really know what genre it is, and like these are maybe some of the words I would use to describe it, but I'm not sure. And also a lot of people have said that what they enjoy most about metal is how it makes them feel. And that I think has to do with, yeah, like that has to do with, you know, as soon as you hear something that's metal, you're like, that makes me feel the way that metal feels. So I know what that is, and I like it.
I think also if you've been talking mostly to women, then or people read as feminine, then
Right.
we're constantly told that our opinions on things aren't worthwhile. We don't get to define any kind of boundaries for anything, let alone musical genres. Metal is like a man's domain, so the idea of a woman getting to say what isn't metal is probably quite alien to most people, sadly. So I think that could be part of it too.
True.
Yeah. And girls are discouraged from getting involved in the scene, picking up guitars. You know, when I can't remember what hashtag it was, but it was a few months ago. It was a kind of general hashtag for women musicians to share their experiences of being patronized and looked down on and mansplained to. But there were just so many people. It was started by a music critic. I can't remember who she was. Music writer.
I'm writing it down so I can ask you about it later, and in case you remember later, you can.
Yeah, I probably won't remember, but if you just Google some relevant terms, and it should come up. And it was just all these stories of people who'd be like, "Yeah, I've been playing guitar for 20 years. I'll turn up to gigs, and the house in-house technicians will treat me like I'm a child who's never picked up a guitar before, and they'll try and mess around with my settings, and then they won't listen to me, and all of this kind of stuff." And I'm sure that it's, well, a lot of the observations were coming from women in the rock and metal scenes. So yeah, it just goes to show the kind of, there is, I think, hostility to women. I think the Merkur episode demonstrates that, definitely.
Yeah.
And, you know, probably more than I can think of at the moment. This is why you should talk to Beth Weingarner. She's very good on this kind of thing as well.
Do you go to concerts often, or do you prefer listening at home?
I go to concerts and gigs as much as I can. It was easier when I was living in London, because I lived in London for 10 years. So it was much easier to go to a gig and then after work, usually wearing my work clothes, so not particularly looking very metal, and then get the bus home or get the tube home or whatever. But now I live in a commuter town outside London, so our last train is at 12:15, and if I miss that, I'm completely stuffed, because it's sort of £100 taxi ride at least back to where we live, and I wouldn't want to miss the last train, so you get quite paranoid. And then if it's a work night as well, I have to factor in a 40-minute train ride on top of the journey from the venue to the station. So it's you know, I definitely go to fewer concerts than I used to, but then I also get a lot more tired than I used to as well, because I don't have a 20-year-old's liver capacity or capacity to miss sleep anymore. Actually, as it happens, I've got my box of concert tickets on my desk. It's been sitting on my desk for ages, and I've been like, this is my kind of, actually, yeah, it's a kind of a box full of artifacts, really. So I've got a Hooded Menace tape. Oh, you should definitely listen to Hooded Menace. Hooded Menace are amazing. They're Finnish kind of melodic death doom, funeral doom. They're really, really good, and they sing kind of loads of horror influenced songs. Oh, you should talk to my friend Claudia. You should definitely talk to my friend Claudia. I'll give you her contact details. So I've got like I've got some.
Oh, that's so cool. I have one somewhere. It's Winter Sun.
Oh, they're quite good. They're okay. Here's that's a poster which I stole from a venue for Skepticism. That was quite cool. A Bloodstock's a metal festival, and that's actually where I met my husband in the flesh for the first time.
Where does that happen?
Hellfest's a really good festival. God, it's on earth. A painting that someone's done, some flyers for shows that I went to. It's really annoying when you buy a ticket for a show and they don't actually send you like a nice physical ticket, like this one, Campfire, another really good band. And so I try and get some sort of like this one, this Maguire concert didn't have I don't think it had a physical ticket, so I picked up a flyer for it so that I could keep that and say, well, I went to that instead. What's a got a patch? I think this is a free one because I don't actually know the band that it's for. Oh, my Hellfest patch, which I keep on meaning to do something with and haven't.
Yeah, that
was tickets. Just a few more tickets.
Oh my gosh!
So, yeah,
that's a lot. That's great. I should start a box like that. I'd love to have.
It's really. Yeah, I'm really glad that I have been collecting them together in this way for such a long time, because it feels like a really, a thing that I'll always be able to look back on. Okay, I've got Secrets of the Moon. Oh, Weezer, they're not really metal, but I like them anyway. Dark Tranquillity.
Do you also have posters and prints and things like that?
Not really very many, because they're a bit like adolescent, aren't they, really? And because most metal posters aren't really. Yeah. I'll show you what we do have. Actually, I'll take you on a little walk around the house. Okay, so this is... My husband also collects his gig tickets, and he made he's got a big frame and put them all in the frame. So I'm going to do that one day. It's just a case of actually getting around to it. And then I'll pop the light on. Going down the stairs.
You could definitely make that look very cool.
We do have this, I don't know if you can see it. Oh, no, there's my face. It's a Walls in the Throne Room poster, which we got the band to sign when they played a gig. So that's quite cool. Yeah, so we've got that up in our hall, but that's about it, really. Okay, I shall return to my previous position.
Okay. Well, good. That gives me time to look at my list of questions.
Cool.
Oh yeah. Do you remember like the last show or a recent gig that you went to? And can you tell me a little bit about what it was and where it was and how it went?
Okay, I'll tell you about the last two, if that's okay, because they're the ones I can remember, but I don't know which one was more recent.
That's okay.
Actually, yeah. I went to one in November, mid-November, which was in the Black Heart, which is a metal rock pub in London, and they have a little venue upstairs, which is really cool. Oh, sorry. Just dropped a load of shit on the floor. So the Black Heart is my favourite pub in London. It's in Camden, right next to the Tube. And I generally try and avoid Camden, but because of the way the metal scene in London works, most gigs tend to be held there, which is a bit of a bugger. So I like to go to the Black Heart wherever possible, because it's actually a nice place. It sells really nice beer. The staff are really cool. It has loads of nice rock and metal posters up on the wall. They quite often play sort of classic trad rock, like dad rock type stuff, which Stu likes. So, and our friends like to go there too, so we quite often meet people there. So I had a thing there for my birthday, and also this band called Cromdu, who are an English black metal band, were playing upstairs. So I kind of spent the time half downstairs with my friends. I went up to see the gig and then came back down again afterwards. And there's another band called Scythian playing, but I think they're really boring, so I didn't bother to stay around for their set. I think it was about a tenner for the ticket. It's quite cheap by London standards. So that was really good. God, that was...
And did you go in your work clothes?
I came from work, yeah, but I work for a charity these days, and I can basically wear what I want. So I just sort of wore like a denim skirt and my Doc Marten boots and a black top. And I was like, that's fine. That's like nice and anonymous.
Yeah.
It was the night of the Paris massacre, actually. So that was really, really a horrible contrast, because I'd had such a really fun night out with my friends and seeing this gig and stuff. And then like on the tube on the way home, well, on the way to the station, I was like reading about it on Twitter and stuff, and I was just like, holy shit, this is horrible, and just like crying and crying because I've been to Paris like loads of times. So anyway, and the other one that I would mention as a recent one is Agaloch, who are another band that I
Oh
really,
yeah,
really
I
like.
love Adele.
There we go. And they played in Islington, at Islington Town Hall, I think. And they played like 2 hours or something. It was amazing. It was a really, really long set, and they played just so much stuff that was really fantastic. And these guys were having a chat behind us, and so I turned around and basically told them to shut up, which I don't feel
Yeah.
guilty at all. It was totally worth it. But it was a really, really good show. And then we had to run to get the bus home afterwards, and we made our train by like 2 minutes, so we were a bit stressed on the way back
And
because we were like, where is this train?
is that a bigger venue than the other one?
Yeah, that's like a proper venue. um yeah, the Black Heart upstairs probably holds about 150 people, if
Okay.
that. Gee, if you had 150 people up there, it would be quite smelly and horrible. Yeah, probably a very small capacity anyway. um the gig venue I've been to most definitely is the Underworld in Camden, which is underneath a pub called the World's End. And it's a complete shithole of a venue. It's a little basement which holds about 500 people, and it smells like vile. It's completely ratty. The floors are always sticky. The beer is ridiculously overpriced. But I kind of have a sneaking affection for it just because I've been there so many times.
Yeah. Do you have like connections with people that run venues or just people that you see often at shows? Have you met people that
Oh,
way?
yeah, definitely. Not so
Yeah.
much people who work at venues or anything,
Yeah.
but definitely have got a, if I go to a metal gig in London these days, I'll probably recognise at least a few people.
Yeah.
Um,
And that's from going to shows in
yeah,
the past?
yeah.
Or yeah.
You get to know one person, and then they introduce you to their friends, and you see their friends at gigs, and they introduce you to their friends. So you just kind of build
Right.
up a sort of a network, which isn't particularly robust, I guess, but it's just nice, just sort of people
Yeah.
to have a quick chat to. And if you're waiting for a band to come on, I'm relatively, I wouldn't say like good friends, but I'm friends with a guy called Frank, who's lead singer of a band called Fen, who are quite well known in the UK. They're a black metal sort of post rock band. Really cool. He's a really nice guy. So yeah,
What was I gonna say? Oh yeah. Who do you usually attend shows with? Do you go with your husband or a group of friends?
yeah, both of those things. Stu
Okay.
and I go to we go to gigs together. Sometimes he goes to death metal gigs by himself. Like if it's a work night and he wants to go and see like Nile or something, I'm like, I have to be in a very specific mood to listen to them.
Yeah.
So I'm just gonna, and also the ticket is £25, so I'm just gonna sit this one out. But you go if you want, honey. And Carcass actually, when they played, they did 4 gigs in a row, I think, in the Underworld. And Stu went to, I think, at least 2. I think he was going to go to another one as well, but he was ill that night. I just went to the final one of those, so he went to a few of those by himself. I have been to gigs by myself though.
How is that experience to go by yourself?
I haven't done it for a while, for obvious reasons, but it was fine. I felt quite kind of like it was something that was good to do, sort of find out more about myself, I suppose. And yeah, it was fun. I remember one of them was my work Christmas party, was being held in November one year, and Gorgoroth was playing as well at the Scala in King's Cross. And I decided that I was going to go to my work Christmas party and then go and see Gorgoroth and then go back to my work Christmas party by myself. So I did. And that was interesting. I was also really drunk. So it kind of was like a big, silly adventure that I did myself. I don't think I do that these days. Like I'm sort of too old and boring to manage that kind of thing. Plus I can't drink half as much as I used to. But yeah, that was an adventure.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was all sorts of Gorgoroth fans wearing their dirty, like sort of not dirty as in physically dirty, just sort of like that whole like dark and
Right.
jagged and clever t-shirts and like long hair and loads of tattoos and stuff. And there was me wearing my like party outfits and a nice skirt and like fancy shoes and stuff. And I was like, hi, I'm Hitsi Goroth. So that was kind of interesting, and how like subverting the typical image of the black metal fan kind of way.
Did that make you feel weird, or you don't really know because you were drunk? Or
I was quite drunk. I just felt, I don't know, I felt like, yeah, I felt it was good to confront. No, that's not quite right. I don't know. It was fun to stand out for that one event.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Let's see. So do you think you generally act or speak or dress differently when you're with other metal fans or at a gig than you do when you're in other places, like at work or with your family?
Probably not really. Dress differently. I wear my Doc Martens most days, so that doesn't tend to change very much. And they're good for gigs because they're quite sturdy. So if people tread on my foot, it's not a big deal. I suppose I'll definitely wear black as opposed to most likely wear black if I'm going to go to a metal gig after work. I have a rubber wristband from Bloodstock Festival from the Sophie charity, which I sometimes wear to go to gigs. Sophie stands for Stamping Out Prejudice, Hatred and Intolerance Everywhere, and it's a charity that was named after a goth girl called Sophie Lancaster, who got murdered in a park by a load of horrible people probably about 10 years ago now. God. Yeah, and her mum set up a charity to kind of challenge prejudice against moshers and goths and metalheads and stuff.
Oh,
so they have a
really,
big presence
cool.
at UK festivals. Yeah. And so I sometimes wear my Sophie wristband, and then if I see someone else wearing a Sophie wristband, it's like, oh, hey, you've got a Sophie wristband. You know, it's like
Oh, so that's like that's a thing you also see other people wearing?
Yeah, definitely.
I've never heard of that, but it's probably a UK thing.
Yeah, it's very much a regional sort of national type thing.
That's cool. So that's sort of like if you see someone else wearing the same wristband, you kind of feel like oh yeah, you care about that issue as well.
One time, and festival wristbands act in the same way. I was on my way back from work one day, and it was about a week after I'd been to Hellfest Festival in 2014. And there was a guy on the train who was in a wheelchair, and I noticed he had a Hellfest wristband on. So I went up to him and I said, I'm really, I don't want to intrude or anything. I can't help noticing. And I could see that I was like, oh shit, he thinks that I've come up to sort of ask him a really rude question about his wheelchair or something. But I was like, oh, you've got a Hellfest wristband on. I think that's like totally cool. I went to Hellfest last week as well. Like, who was your favorite band? What did you see? Like, which was your favorite set and stuff? And so we had a nice chat about that. And I was like, oh God, I really could have handled the start of that a bit better. But I'm glad that I did it anyway, because he seemed really happy to talk about Hellfest. And if someone came up to me and was like, oh my God, you're at Hellfest, that's really cool, I'd be like, yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, I think it seems like people are generally very happy to talk about that kind of thing, especially if you're not at a gig or at some kind of metal event. To see someone else and meet someone else who likes metal, it feels like kind of a secret club.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Does your family and do your friends all know that you're into metal? Is that something people know about you?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Do people ever react in strange ways when they find that out?
Sometimes they do, because of me, in that outwardly I'm quite kind of not your typical metalhead in lots of ways. Many tattoos. I work in a charity sector. I'm definitely someone who tries to do feminist things, and I don't sort of wear spiky necklaces or what's it called, that the Norse hammer, Mjolnir or whatever. necklaces. I don't have one of those. So people sometimes are a bit surprised, like, oh, I didn't think you'd be into that kind of thing, like when they first meet me. But all my friends know that I'm into metal.
Yeah.
Fair number of them are into metal themselves. And then obviously my husband's really into metal as well, which is how we met. So that's fine.
Right.
And it works as well. People just sort of accept it as part of my, like, who I am, I guess, my little eccentricities, and it's, you know, it's fine. It's a non-issue.
So you said you don't really think of yourself as like a typical metal fan.
Right.
What would you consider a typical metal fan to be? What are your associations? They don't have to, I mean, obviously I know that not everyone is the same, but you know, like we generally have ideas about what, you know, what characteristics those people would have.
I suppose it goes into the tricky territory of not wanting to stereotype. Because I get sick of oh, cute kitty. I get sick of stereotypes about metalheads that I read in the press.
Right.
And it's like always like, oh, some sad 15-year-old physics student who has long hair, hasn't had a shower for a month or whatever. And I'm like, we're not all like that, you know. But then maybe I'm being a hypocrite because maybe somewhere in my head that is the kind of image of a typical metal fan. Yeah, it's hard. I guess, well, probably I would say women as metal fans. There's lots of us, but statistically, your typical average metalhead would probably be male. So that means that I'm starting off as a minority within metal, even though in pretty much every other way I fit in with the. I'm not someone who is going to stick out too much at a metal gig. Like there's a lady who I've seen at a few London gigs who's a hijabi, and that's really like I think that's totally awesome that she goes to gigs and stuff. So I'd say that she would definitely be a much more atypical metal fan than me because I am white basically, and go there with my male partner. So you know, it's in some way in like this one way, because of my gender, I do stick out, but then within the metal scene, everything else about me is quite normal and conforming, really.
And I feel like if you're wearing a hijab, it's like there are a lot of associations with that because, you know, it has to do with religion, it has to do with gender, it has to do with ethnicity, and also it's well, it's a way of dressing, and so it's not the typical way of dressing. So I feel like that in particular is very interesting because there's so many different things that you kind of assume about a person when you see them wearing a hijab. Let me see. Are there things that you don't always like about metal or being a metal fan?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Where do I begin? Yeah, I know that there's been a huge amount of debate in feminist circles, especially online, about being a fan of problematic things. And I would definitely list metal and especially black metal up there as being potentially hugely problematic. I mean, there's been a few occasions when I've listened to a song not knowing who the artist was and thought, oh, I really like this, and looked at the artist like, oh, actually they're Nazis. Like they're not just sort of playing around Nazis, they're full-on Nazis who give money to violent racist groups who go out and beat people up because of the color of their skin or whatever. So I'm like, yeah, that's like something that I wish I didn't have to deal with, but I do have to deal with it. So I just have to get on with it, really. I decided a long time ago, and I've never wavered from this, that I'm not going to listen to a band if they're full-on Nazis. Like there's just no point, you know. It's a waste of my time. I don't want to give mind space to these people, even if, like, you know, I have friends, mostly men, I have to say, who do listen to who aren't Nazis, who would consider themselves even to be, you know, left-wing people, and sympathetic to feminist aims and so on, but they do listen to NSBM, and they kind of separate the art from the artist, and I don't think I'm able to do that in the same way. Maybe, you know, it's one of these things where there's no right or wrong answer. Probably if you talk to 100 people, you get 100 different views on it. But for me, my line in the sand is definitely no Nazis. So I try not to. Well, I don't stray from that. One time I remember I was listening to Related Artists on Last FM, just a stream, and some Croda came on, and I was like, oh, was it Valknut? It was one of the two. And I listened to it, and as soon as I was over the other side of the room, so as I sort of walked over to check what the track was and switch it over, because I didn't want it appearing on my Last FM profile, for one thing, I was like, this literally has to be NSBM because it's really good. Like, it's really sonically a beautiful song, and it's exactly the kind of thing that I like. So if it wasn't NSBM, someone would have recommended it to me ages ago, and I would already be a fan of it and listen to it. So therefore, it has to be NSBM because it's not something that I know. And yeah, it was. I think it was Valknut actually, who are Ukrainian NSBM linked bands. So I was like, yeah. It's not a huge sacrifice because there's a lot of amazing music out there that isn't made by Nazis. So, but that's definitely something that I find tricky within the scene, as in like disgusting.
I think there is something, just the fact that you said, you know, this has to be NSBM because I like it so much. I think there's something about really sort of harsh and noisy music that attracts both people who subscribe to racist and National Socialist views and people like you and I, from what I understand, who subscribe to like more feminist and queer progressive things. And I think there's a reason for that. I'm having a little bit of trouble articulating it, but I think it has to do with sort of the difficulty that people in both of those groups have in expressing their views, which are seen as like really out there. And that like harsh music being sort of a way to a very like non-mainstream way to express oneself.
I think there's something there within metal as well.
Right.
There's kind of like so much black metal is so sincere in so many ways, but at the same time, there's this kind of level of meta ridiculousness. You know, you look at someone wearing corpse paint and wearing spikes and with fake blood daubed all over them, and it's just like, come on dudes, what are you doing? This is silly. You're standing in the snow, you're holding a sword, which you've never used that sword to kill anyone. You're not a warrior, you know. But at the same time, they're like, they can, I think that the scene as a whole, apart from the very strange people who hang out on the anus.com message boards, going on about how metal's being ruined by women and, you know, slurs for every other group that you can think of. I think most people in the scene kind of do recognize that dual nature of metal, that it's at the same time completely sincere and also really aware of its own ridiculousness. And it's just so easy to mock in lots of ways as well, but people know that, but then they carry on doing the same things. And especially, I'm talking mostly about black metal when I talk about this, by the way, because it's what I'm more familiar with, and also it does seem to be kind of the area of metal which attracts the most sort of divergent views, in terms of, you do have the out and out Nazis, and then you also have like the communists and socialists, red anarchist black metal movement as well. So that's kind of an interesting tension there. Personally, I quite like anti-cosmic black metal. I like that. I like the idea of music that's trying to sort of negate the universe. I think that like that's definitely sort of equal opportunities, hatred and despair and desolation. So that's okay. Yeah. I don't have a problem with anti-Christian stuff either.
Yeah.
But if I found a black metal band that was from a Western country that was just very anti-Islam, that would definitely not be a band that I would listen to. So yeah. just because Christianity in the West typically has a history and a tradition of hegemony and power and influence, and no one's really persecuting Christians, definitely not in the UK, despite the fact that like sometimes court judgments will make them have to allow gay people to stay in their B&Bs or whatever, but they're not really persecuted, sorry. So yeah, that's fine.
Let's see. So when you go to gigs or when you post on a forum or interact in a metal context, do you ever feel like you're being treated differently because you're a woman?
Not really. No. Like one time, I was at a gig, and okay, I'm backtracking a little bit. I'm friends with a guy called Tom, and Tom is friends with a guy called Richard. And I met Tom. Well, I went to Tom's party, and Richard was at the party. And I was just wearing completely nothing that would suggest that I was into metal at anywhere. And I met Richard. And I was like, "Oh, hi, you know, here's Stu. He's my at the time boyfriend." Blah blah blah. And then we got on and stuff. And then a few months later, I was at a metal gig, and Richard was there, and he was like, "Holy shit! I didn't realize you were into metal. What are you doing here?" You know, and I was like, "Aha, is that a sexist assumption?" But then I think that actually maybe it was just because I'd given no indication when we'd met previously that I was into metal in any way. So I guess he could have. I think he did say something like, "Oh, you just here because Stu's here," because I think when we had met, Stu was wearing t-shirts, like I don't know, probably Inquisition t-shirt or something. Oh yeah, talk about bands that I can't probably listen to anymore because they're probably Nazis. But anyway, this was a few years ago before the whole sort of Inquisition and Nazis thing came out into the public realm. So yeah, that kind of sticks out as being an instance where possibly I was treated differently because of my gender, but then again, probably not really, because Richard, bless his heart, is a bit of a misanthrope who just kind of hates most people generally. It's one of these people that like I'm friends with, and I'm like, yeah, no, I know you're a terrible person, but we're friends anyway. It's fine. Other than that, not really. Don't think so. I don't tend to interact a huge amount with metal online stuff, really. I'll talk about metal on Facebook with friends, where that's fine because I know that everyone involved is a reasonable human being, and I'll tweet about it sometimes with friends on Twitter, and they're all sort of feminists or feminist inclined people, so I know that that's my gender, and then a lot of them are women as well who I talk to metal about, so that's really another non-issue there. In real life, I guess because for the past few years I've just been going to gigs with Stu and sort of been, you know, like quite obviously with him. I suppose that's kind of sometimes it's maybe a shield. So because I'm with Stu, I don't have to necessarily make an effort to talk to people outside my normal circle, and then I'll just sort of see my friends, and that's okay. But also maybe he kind of acts as a bullshit shield and sort of puts off people who might otherwise have come up to me and been like, "Oh, I see you're wearing a t-shirt with a picture of Core Scorpii on it. Do you really know anything about the band, or do you just like the logo?" You know, so maybe that's kind of another privilege that I have, in that I go along to gigs and I'm not really in a position to take bullshit from people.
Yeah. Or unwanted flirting, I would imagine.
Oh, yeah, God. Yeah, one time I was, Stu and I actually, we were at a gig at the Underworld in Camden, and we were with our friend Anne Louise, and Anne Louise is she's about 6 foot tall, and she's just very beautiful. She's got hair down to like her bum. She's just a lovely girl. She's really pretty, and she was wearing a corset and you know, a skirt and boots and stuff, like typical sort of metal chick outfits. And we were walking to the stage with her, but we were a little bit behind because it was quite busy and there were people. And then like after she walked past this dude, and I just saw him like completely do a sort of like double take, like in a sort of really exaggerated, almost trying to be comedic kind of way, and then sort of like jaw drop open, like hubba hubba. And I just looked at him and I was like, really? Like, you're really going to do that? You're just going to objectify her like that? So I kind of just rolled my eyes, and then just, so that kind of sticks out as well as being one of the occasions when I have seen objectification of a woman at a metal show in the audience, definitely.
Right.
But again, you know, he didn't walk after her and bother her. He didn't like sort of go up and try and get her number or anything. He just sort of, and then I don't think that she probably even saw what happened because she'd gone ahead. I only saw it because I was following a bit behind. I don't know, maybe it's just London. I think because London is such a big city, and there's just, you know, there's people from all over who come to metal gigs in London. It tends to be just a bit more of a mixed crowd. You even see some non-white people occasionally, you
Yeah.
know. So it might be different than in a small town scene somewhere outside London or another country. I don't really know.
How do you feel about mosh pits? Do you participate in them? Do they bother you?
They don't really. They kind of annoy me sometimes, but at the same time, it's like these people who buy flats in the cities above pubs and bars and then complain about the noise. It's like, well, what did you think when you moved in? It's like, if you go to a metal show, it's the same sort of thing. There's going to be pushing and shoving, maybe not at an Agalloch gig, but certainly if you go and see like Nile or cattle decapitation or Carcass or something, there's going to be Anil Nathrak, my God. They positively encourage stage diving and walls of death and all that kind of thing. So yeah, that's like it's just part and parcel of it. I don't particularly enjoy it, but I'm currently not disabled, so it doesn't really bother me from an access point of view. It's not going to endanger me because I've got the mobility to move away from it. I'm also relatively tall as well. I'm about 5'8", and I wear Doc Martens with a sort of inch sole, so I can kind of generally see over stuff most of the time. So that's quite useful as well. I have been in a couple of mosh pits when I was younger. One time I went to see In Flames and Lamb of God, like back when I was sort of starting out, like finding out about different metal bands. And there was a mosh pit, and I thought, okay, I've got this opportunity now to go into a mosh pit and see what it's all about. So I gave my bag to my friend Phil, who was at the concert with me, and just sort of went off into the mosh pit. And I was like trying to get involved, but like I would see people sort of come towards me and then sort of like hold off and not sort of. I'd be like, what are you doing? I really felt like they were holding back from engaging with me as an equal in the pit because they're like, oh, I don't want to slam into a girl and make her fall over, or I don't want to hurt her, you know. So I did think, oh, come on, guys, really. Chivalry as a form of soft sexism definitely alive and well in the metal scene.
Yeah.
Have there been other times? Yeah. The worst thing I think is actually when people with really long hair just windmill and then their hair gets in your face. But that's
Yeah.
just a thing. So I just hold my arm like about here, and then it catches on my hand, and I'm just like, that's fine. Just don't
Yeah.
I just don't want it in my face, you know. Come on, guys.
Do you tend to like to be? Oh, sorry.
People with really horrible like white guy dreadlocks. Oh, they're the worst. Definitely the worst. Ugh, yeah. Anyway.
Do you tend to like to be at the front when you're at a gig, or where do you usually stand?
To the side, sort of about midway, I'd say, so that mosh pits will form up to one side and ahead of us, and we can generally get an uninterrupted view. Yeah, we've got a typical spot when we go to gigs at the Underworld because we've been there so many times. So it's like, oh, I'll see you at the usual spot if one of us goes off to get a beer or whatever. Yeah, not front. I have been at the front for some shows, like when Cavell Attack played at the 100 Club, I think. No, it's a Borderline Club. Sorry, this probably isn't relevant, but you know, and I was right at the front for that because it was a tiny venue, and I was like, I really want to be at the front for this because it'll be really good, and it was really good, and the band like crowd surfed over our heads and stuff, and it was really cool.
So there are like some of the bands that you would prefer to.
Yeah, and if it's like a really not well attended gig, I'll go up to the front sometimes. Yeah. Like Hooded Menace. I saw Hooded Menace and was right on the front stage for that. That was cool. At festivals as well, but that's a bit different because it's, I don't know, it's just better being at the front at a festival. So,
Yeah.
but not for like a main stage, obviously, because those people all sort of queue for hours and hours to get to the very, very front. But if a band's playing on a smaller stage, like Moon Sorrow, I was on the front for Moon Sorrow at Hellfest in 2012, and that was really cool.
You mentioned kind of a not wanting to follow discussions and arguments online about metal because of sort of the soap opera-ness of it, and you also said something about how people remark that women are ruining metal. Why do you think people would say that?
People, well, men, white men, say this because they see metal definitely as their own creation and their own stronghold. So any reminder that people who aren't white men might be into metal or influential in metal circles is unwelcome to a certain number of metal people who like to see themselves as kind of the owners of metal, the ones who define what it is. There was an attempt actually when Gamergate started up. You know Gamergate, right? The whole online nonsense. There was an attempt by a few people to start up Metalgate. So I'd recommend having a look at hashtag Metalgate. It's kind of hilarious. It didn't really take off, but there were a few people who were like, SJWs in my metal, no thanks. And it was just ridiculous. And it didn't really get much traction beyond a few websites, including one run by an American neo-Nazi who's a very unpleasant person. But there seems to be, this is something that would be good to talk to Kim about, because there's a lot of hatred that's focused on her specifically, because she writes for mainstream media outlets. Like she's written for the New York Times about metal, and so people kind of use her as a scapegoat. They say, oh, she's a girl, she doesn't know anything about metal, and she's like writing about it for the mainstream. We don't want mainstream attention. We want to just like sit in our dank hole and fester or whatever. So that's one thing that's going on. I think it's like metal is in some ways quite conservative in, I don't know, I think when it started up it was in some ways a bit revolutionary, but that sort of willingness to smash the system has been a bit subsumed by wanting to preserve white male privileges and sort of using maybe valid complaints of white working class men who founded parts of metal like Black Sabbath and sort of these blue collar bands from the Midlands and the ones from the States as well, and then to sort of say, well, this is our art form to represent our frustrations and our powerlessness in the face of late capitalism. And then if women kind of want to say, hey, how about not treating women in the scene like sex objects? Would that be okay? And it's like, well, no, we've always done this. This has been in here from the start. So there's kind of an unwillingness to recognize that the world has changed, that metal has changed, the scene has changed, and blaming women then for every new thing that comes along and threatens their view of the way that things should be and the way that things are. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
Lots more on that. Yeah. I suppose metal. Yeah, I suppose it fits back to the view of the stereotypical metalhead, which would be man, probably young-ish, definitely white, probably heterosexual, or at least like pretending to be heterosexual. There was the whole kerfuffle when Garl came out, Garl from Golgoroth. And then metal bands, I suppose, catering to that in some ways. And also there's this real overlap that I've seen with internet atheists and free speech absolutists with a kind of libertarian edge to them, and some parts of metal. So they're into this whole like, if you can't take it, you're just a pussy. You need to get out of our scene because
Right.
we're going to say whatever we want. And it's like, well, you can say whatever you want, but if you do that, then you're kind of a dick. And they're like, well, I don't care. I'm a metalhead. I can say what I want. Rah rah rah. So there's that as well, I think, which is quite a toxic undercurrent. It's sort of like these, South Park libertarian type free speech people who think, oh well, nothing's off limits. If I want to write a song about like raping women in a forest, where blah blah blah, and then desecrating a Quran, then that's my right. If
Yeah.
you say that I can't do that, or if you say I'm bad for doing that, then you're not really metal. I'm the metal one, not you. So there's that as well.
Yeah. No, that's really good. I'm glad that articulated a lot of stuff that I would like to talk about. So you subscribe to Metpal, right?
Yes, I do.
Why do you follow Metpal, and why do you think it's important to have the kind of conversations that happen there?
I originally signed up when I was doing my master's degree, and I wrote my dissertation on masculinity in black metal. I can send you a copy if you want. It's not my best work, but it's yeah. I don't know. I'd probably write it completely differently now if I could do it all over again. But
yeah, of course.
So yes, I signed up. Obviously, I can't remember who told me about Metpal. Maybe Keith Khan Harris did. Someone, not sure. But I somehow came across Metpal and signed up for it, and yeah, it was definitely useful when I was doing my dissertation, and it's useful as well as a place where people can get information from around the world and talk to scholars from different countries. So that's a really appealing part of it. And as for it being important, it's kind of semi-private, so we can sort of thrash out issues, no pun intended, which affect the scene at large, and sort of talk about trends and things in a something that's not readily available online for any sort of wandering troll to come and drive by shooting, spatter us with insults and call us all pussies and whatever, and then run off. It's good. It's gone quite quiet recently, though. Is that just me? Don't know.
I feel like there hasn't been a whole lot going on. Okay, I'm going to have to end this soon, but I want to ask you, you can definitely send it to me, but I just briefly, what was your dissertation? What was your, finding, or what kind of points were you making?
It gets back to this whole thing of, in some ways, the semantic markers around black metal especially seem to kind of subvert supposed traditional masculinity. So the kind of the high shrieking vocals, which typify lots of black metal, long hair especially, kind of aesthetically sort of the interest in sort of fantasy and things. I suppose that's a bit more contested, but it always seems to me to be slightly quote unquote feminized kind of way of thinking about the world. And then the idea of masculinity as being linked to the sun and sun worship and kind of Apollo and stuff, and then women being linked to the moon. Obviously the biological sort of link with menstruation, if you're talking in a sort of biological basics, radical feminist kind of way, which isn't necessarily what I believe, but it's useful sometimes as a lens to think about it. So then black metal, I think, would be definitely a lot more associated with the moon than with the sun. And I kind of found examples of black metal bands with, like, this is quite I suppose a surface, superficial way of thinking about it, but like when the sun exists in black metal, it's like a black sun, it's like a dark sun, it's the inverse of a sun, it's a sun which is dead, it's a sun which is sucking all light and heat out of the universe. And then there's lots of sympathy for the moon, and the moon is seen as like a mistress, the moon is seen as like a queen, or like a, you know, a higher power that black metal bands kind of sacrifice to in some ways. And so it's like, well, you know, on the surface of it, it seems like there's some sort of interesting dynamic going on here, but then actually when black metal bands are given the chance to subvert masculine tropes, they tend not to take them. So they sort of, you know, back away and go, oh, you know, no homo. So it's quite disappointing in the end that there's this potential for radical critique of masculinity and a kind of a breaking down of barriers. Like if they really want to, if they're really being quote unquote anti-cosmic, you know, they want to destroy all the boundaries between everything and destroy the cosmos, then retreating into sort of infantile ideas of what masculinity is and what it can be ultimately undermines that whole effort, because
Right.
it just shows that they're actually really conservative at heart. So I say that, you know, black metal does possibly have did used to have some sort of revolutionary value, but this has been squandered by flawed men who can't see beyond their own noses. So
Wow.
that
Well,
was, yeah, I got quite angry actually. I was quite angry by the end.
yeah, I can imagine. I mean, yeah, there are things that I also feel angry about, but there are also things that I feel excited about in the process of writing this paper, and I think that's really cool, especially, you know, like meeting other people like you who have similar ideas about the potential for radical critique and you know, feminism within metal communities. So I would totally love to read that. I know it's something you wrote a long time ago, but if you feel comfortable sending it to
Yeah,
me.
I'll send it. It's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that's all I had to ask
Okay.
for now. I'll definitely follow up with an email just about probably I might ask you, because I'm looking for people to define some terms that I'm using in my paper, and I'm not using like a dictionary because I want to use, I think it's important to show kind of the variety of different definitions that people have. So for example, I've had a few people define death metal, and their definitions are all different, although they share some things, so it's really interesting. So I might ask you to define some things if you choose to do that. And also, I would totally love to be introduced to Kim and Natalie Zed and or any other friends that you think
Yeah,
might
sure.
have something useful to say.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, cool,
It's really
great.
nice speaking to you as well.
Yeah, you too. Thank you so much.
That's fine. Have a nice rest of the day. It's quite
Yeah,
dark actually. Yeah.
yeah, it's pretty rainy here. It's a good day for video games.
Yeah.
All right, well, I'll talk to you soon. Thank you so much for
Lovely.
speaking with me.
No problem. And good luck with your project as well. And do
Thank you.
send us a copy when it's all done and everything, obviously.
Yeah, of course.
Cool.
Great.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.